A Navy SEAL lived alone near an abandoned mine, haunted by the one child he could not save. But one freezing night, his Belgian Malinois K9 heard something beneath the mountain. Not a wolf, not the wind, a cry for help buried under the snow. When the SEAL followed his dog into the darkness, he found a wounded mother dog guarding 3 puppies. But beside the mine, his K9 uncovered a tiny purple glove. That glove would lead them to a missing girl, a buried secret, and a miracle only God could have guided. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep creating more powerful stories. Snow had a way of making Raven Creek look innocent. By nightfall, the old mining town in western Montana disappeared beneath a white silence, so complete that even the broken roofs, abandoned rail tracks, and rusted warning signs seemed forgiven. The mountains rose behind the town like sleeping giants, their dark pine forests bent under the weight of winter. Far above the last row of houses, where the road narrowed into a frozen trail, the Raven Creek mine waited in the storm. No one went there after dark. No one with sense went there at all. The mine had been closed for years, sealed after a collapse that took 7 men and left the town with a kind of grief that never fully melted, even in summer. Old people still lowered their voices when they spoke of it. Children dared one another to run up to the gate in daylight. Hunters avoided the ridge when snow fell heavy, because the ground around the old shafts could open without warning. Caleb Mercer lived closer to that place than anyone else. His cabin stood at the edge of the timberline, half hidden among black pines, with a narrow porch, a stone chimney, and windows that glowed only when the fire was high enough to betray that someone was still inside. Caleb was a male U.S. Navy SEAL in his early 30s, tall and disciplined, with an angular, rugged face, a sharp jawline, cold blue-gray eyes, and a modern short undercut trimmed tight at the sides. He wore a complete green digital camouflage uniform even at home, not because he wanted to look like a soldier, but because routine was one of the few things that still obeyed him. His blouse and trousers were always properly fitted and buttoned, his plain black belt centered, his black combat boots placed near the door with the toes facing out. He had no helmet, no vest, no patches, no weapon, no unnecessary gear. He did not need accessories to look dangerous. Stillness did that for him. People in town called him polite, but not friendly, reliable, but not close. The kind of man who could fix a roof in silence, pay for a stranger's medicine without leaving his name, and then cross the street to avoid being thanked. War had taken something from Caleb that no metal could return. He carried it in the way his eyes checked every reflection, in the way his shoulders tightened at sudden noise, in the way he never sat with his back to a door. The worst part was not what he remembered. It was what he could not stop replaying. A boy's small hand pulling at his sleeve in a village far from Montana. The urgent panic in that child's face. The seconds Caleb had misunderstood. And the explosion that followed before anyone could correct the mistake. Since then, every unanswered signal felt like an accusation. Only Atlas could move through Caleb's defenses without permission. Atlas was a full-grown male Belgian Malinois. K9, 4 to 5 years old, lean and muscular, with a deep fawn mahogany coat, a distinct black facial mask, upright ears, and intense dark amber eyes that seemed to study the world with almost human seriousness. He wore a tan, tactical K9 vest and a simple working dog collar, both kept clean and ready. Atlas had served beside men who spoke in hand signals and trusted silence more than comfort. He understood commands, but more than that, he understood Caleb. When Caleb woke from nightmares with his breath trapped in his chest, Atlas would place his muzzle against Caleb's wrist and wait until the shaking stopped. When Caleb stood too long before the locked metal box beneath his bed, the one that held folded letters, a cracked photograph, and a dog tag that was not his, Atlas would give one low whine, not begging, not warning, simply reminding him that the past had no right to own the whole room. That evening, the power flickered twice before failing across the ridge. Caleb barely reacted. He had stacked dry wood beside the hearth, filled 2 lanterns, and checked the radio battery before the storm began. Preparedness was not a habit for him. It was a language. The cabin smelled of pine smoke, old leather, cold iron, and black coffee. On the kitchen table sat a half-repaired radio, a coil of wire, and a dented mug Caleb had not washed because no one else would see it. Outside, the snow thickened against the windows until the world beyond the glass became a moving wall of white. Atlas lay near the hearth, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but not sleeping. Caleb sat at the table, working on the radio with steady hands, when Atlas suddenly lifted his head. It was not the sharp movement of a dog hearing a deer near the tree line, nor the hard alert of a threat approaching the door. This was stranger. Atlas stood slowly, ears forward, body tense, gaze locked toward the north ridge. Caleb stopped turning the screwdriver. "What is it?" he asked. Atlas did not bark. He walked to the front door, then back to Caleb, then to the window facing the mountain. His claws clicked once on the floorboards. His eyes never left the storm. Caleb listened. Wind, snow, the low complaint of old trees bending. Nothing else. "No," Caleb said quietly, more to himself than the dog. "Not tonight." Atlas turned, crossed the room, and did something he had never done before. He took Caleb's gray wool scarf from the chair beside the door, gripped it gently in his teeth, and carried it back to him. Caleb stared at the scarf. It was not special to anyone but him. Faded, rough, military plain, the kind of thing a man kept because it had been with him through too many winters to throw away. Atlas dropped it at Caleb's boots and looked up. For a moment, the cabin vanished. Caleb was not in Montana anymore. He was back in that faraway village, hearing a child's voice swallowed by dust, feeling a small hand pull at his sleeve, seeing eyes that begged him to understand before language could catch up. His chest tightened so violently he had to grip the edge of the table. Atlas did not move. The dog only lowered his head and nudged the scarf forward, as if some unseen hand had given him a message Caleb was too wounded to hear. Then, beneath the wind, so faint Caleb first thought it was memory, came a sound from the mountain. Not a howl, not a crack of timber, but a thin, broken cry. Caleb rose so fast the chair scraped backward. His pulse had changed. Not fear exactly. Not yet. Something older than fear. A call answered before the mind could argue. He pulled on his winter coat over the green camouflage uniform, tightened the laces of his black combat boots, and clipped Atlas's working leash to the simple collar beneath the tan vest. He took a flashlight, a coil of rope, a small medical kit, thermal cloths, and a folding utility blade. He did not take a weapon. Whatever waited out there was either already wounded or already dead, and Caleb had carried enough things meant to end life. Tonight, if Atlas was right, he would carry only what might preserve it. Before stepping out, he paused by the shelf near the door where a small paper bag sat folded. It had been left there that morning by June Whitaker, his nearest neighbor and perhaps the only person in Raven Creek stubborn enough to care about him without permission. June was 72, small but strong in the way mountain widows often were, with silver-gray hair usually tied in a loose bun, deeply lined skin shaped by hard winters, and hazel eyes that could be gentle one second and impossible to argue with the next. She had lost her husband in the Raven Creek mine collapse decades earlier, but grief had not made her soft or bitter. It had made her practical. She left soup on Caleb's porch when storms came and pretended not to know he returned, the jars scrubbed clean before dawn. Inside the bag were 2 wrapped biscuits and a note in her thin handwriting. "Eat before the cold starts thinking for you." Caleb almost smiled, but Atlas pulled toward the door again. The smile disappeared. "All right," Caleb said. "We go." The cold struck them like a living thing. Snow whipped across the porch in hard white sheets, stinging Caleb's face and clinging to Atlas's black mask. The lantern beside the door swayed on its hook, throwing a weak amber circle over the steps. Beyond that circle, the forest was gone, replaced by darkness and motion. Atlas did not hesitate. He moved down the steps and into the yard, steady, focused, mission-ready, but not hunting. Caleb knew the difference. Atlas was tracking a need, not a target. That difference frightened him more. They pushed into the pines, following a path only Atlas seemed able to read. Caleb kept the flashlight low, sweeping for broken branches, hidden roots, and sudden drops beneath the snow. The wind erased their footprints almost as soon as they made them. Every few yards, Atlas stopped and lifted his nose, drawing in the storm as if scent could survive where sound could not. Caleb's breath burned in his lungs. His gloved hand tightened on the leash, though Atlas was not pulling wildly. The dog moved with a terrible certainty. The farther they climbed, the more the cabin disappeared behind them, until there was no warm window, no chimney smoke, no proof that safety had ever existed. Only the mountain remained. Caleb tried not to think about the mine. He failed. Everyone in Raven Creek knew the stories. The support beams rotten as old bones, the shafts half collapsed, the lower tunnels flooded in spring and froze in winter. June's husband had died somewhere beneath that ridge, trapped with 6 others while rescue crews dug for 3 days and found silence. Caleb had once asked June why she stayed in a town that had taken so much from her. She had looked toward the mountain and said, "Because leaving a grave behind does not make grief lighter." He had understood more than he wanted to. Atlas suddenly stopped. Caleb nearly stepped into him. The dog stood rigid beside a line of half-buried warning posts where the old mining property began. A rusted sign swung from one chain, its red letters almost hidden beneath ice. "Danger, unstable ground, keep out." Caleb aimed the flashlight beyond it. The beam caught the outline of the abandoned service road, the collapsed fence, the black mouth of a side entrance half covered by snow and brush. The mine seemed to breathe cold air from the earth itself. Caleb swallowed. Atlas. The dog looked back at him, and for the first time that night, Caleb saw something in those amber eyes that was not training. It was pleading. Atlas stepped forward, then stopped at the entrance and lowered his body almost to the ground. His ears tilted. A soft whine came from his throat. Caleb crouched beside him. At first, there was only wind moving over the ridge. Then he saw the marks. Not clear tracks, not after this much snow, but shallow disturbances leading toward the side entrance. Something had dragged itself, or been dragged. Beside those marks were smaller impressions, scattered and uneven, like tiny paws that had stumbled through the drift before disappearing into the dark. Caleb's skin went cold beneath the coat. He moved the flashlight slowly across the snow. Near the entrance, caught on a splinter of old timber, was a strand of dark fur stiff with ice. Atlas leaned forward, sniffed it, and gave one low, broken sound. Caleb had heard him make that sound only once before, beside a wounded handler who did not come home. "Easy," Caleb whispered, though he was no longer sure which of them needed calming. He stepped closer to the mine entrance. The air flowing out was colder than the storm, damp and mineral-heavy, carrying the smell of old earth, rust, and something faintly animal. Caleb lifted the flashlight and aimed it into the tunnel. The beam reached only a few yards before the darkness swallowed it. He listened. Nothing. Then Atlas pulled the scarf from where Caleb had tucked it inside his coat and tugged it free. Not playfully, not disobediently, but with urgent care. The scarf fell open in the snow at Caleb's feet, like a bandage waiting for a wound. Caleb's throat tightened. He bent, picked it up, and wrapped it around his hand. "You hear someone," he said softly. Atlas did not look away from the tunnel. Caleb took one step inside, then another. The wooden beams groaned above him. Snow hissed behind him at the entrance. He had not gone more than 6 feet when the sound came again, clearer this time. A weak, trembling cry from somewhere deep inside the abandoned mine. Then another, smaller, fading. Caleb froze, every nerve awake. Atlas moved to his side, steady and silent, facing the same darkness. Caleb lifted the flashlight higher, and the beam caught fresh scrape marks along the frozen ground leading inward. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Hold on," he said, though he did not yet know who he was speaking to. "We're coming." The chapter ends with Caleb and Atlas standing at the mouth of the frozen mine tunnel, the storm raging behind them, the darkness ahead answering with one more fragile sound of life. Caleb Mercer stepped into the old Raven Creek mine with Atlas at his side and the storm closing behind them like a door. The beam of his flashlight cut a narrow path through the dark, catching wet stone, splintered timber, and the glimmer of ice hanging from the ceiling like broken glass. Every breath he took tasted of rust, frozen earth, and something old that had been sealed away too long. The mine did not feel empty. It felt patient. It felt as if the mountain had been holding its breath for years, waiting for someone foolish or faithful enough to come back inside. Atlas moved ahead by half a step, his tan tactical vest brushing against Caleb's knee whenever the tunnel narrowed. The Belgian Malinois did not pull now. He advanced with careful certainty, placing each paw as if he understood the ground could betray them. His upright ears caught sounds Caleb could not hear, and his dark amber eyes stayed fixed on the black throat of the tunnel. Caleb kept the flashlight low, sweeping for rotten boards and hidden gaps beneath the snow blown in through the entrance. The wooden beams above him groaned once, and the sound traveled through his body like memory. He stopped. For half a second, the mind became another place, another tunnel, another darkness. His gloved fingers tightened around the rope over his shoulder. He heard again the distant snap of a radio, the word "wait," the blast that had followed too soon, and the boy's hand pulling at his sleeve. Caleb shut his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, Atlas was looking back at him. Not impatient, not confused, just steady. Caleb whispered, "I'm here." It was not clear whether he was speaking to the dog, the mountain, or the ghost that had followed him all the way from war. They moved deeper. The tunnel angled downward, not sharply, but enough that Caleb felt the old mine drawing them in. Snow had drifted through cracks in the entrance and melted into slick patches across the floor. Atlas stopped at one of them, sniffed, then stepped around it. Caleb followed and saw why. Beneath the thin skin of ice was a dark gap where the planks had rotted away. A careless step would have dropped a man waist-deep into broken boards. Maybe worse. "Good boy," Caleb murmured. Atlas did not look proud. He simply moved on, mission-focused, as if praise was less important than time. The faint cry came again, smaller now, swallowed by stone. Caleb's chest tightened. It was not one voice. There were several, weak, uneven, alive. He crouched near a fallen support beam and found the first clear sign, a smear in the dust, then a streak where something had dragged itself across the frozen ground. Beside it were tiny paw marks, scattered and frantic, too small to belong to a grown dog. Caleb touched the edge of one print with 2 fingers. His jaw clenched. "Puppies." Atlas's ears shifted at the word. Then the dog gave a low whine and pressed forward into a side passage almost hidden by hanging strips of old tarp and collapsed brush. Caleb angled his shoulders through the gap after him. The space beyond was narrower, colder, and more unstable. The ceiling dipped low, forcing Caleb to bend. His broad shoulders brushed the stone. Every instinct he had told him this was a bad place to be. Every instinct Atlas had told him someone was still waiting. They found her beneath a broken frame of timber, where the side passage opened into a small work pocket carved into the rock. At first, Caleb saw only eyes, 2 amber-brown points reflecting his flashlight from the dark. Then the shape lifted its head, and the beam revealed a female German shepherd curled in the dirt and snow, her body bent around 3 tiny puppies pressed against her belly. She was around 6 years old, though hardship had aged her face beyond that. Her black and tan fur was clumped with ice, mud, and coal dust. Her ribs showed beneath her coat. One ear stood upright in proud defiance, while the other bent slightly from an old injury, giving her face a wounded, noble asymmetry. A cracked brown leather collar hung loose around her neck, and from it dangled half of a broken metal tag. One of her hind legs was trapped beneath a fallen board. She was shaking, but not from weakness alone. She was afraid. She was furious. She was a mother who had already decided that if death wanted her children, death would have to go through her first. Her lips lifted when Caleb took a step closer. A low warning trembled in her throat. Atlas immediately lowered himself to the ground. The Belgian Malinois did not challenge her. He turned his head slightly away, softened his posture, and lay still in the dust with his paws forward, as if showing her he had not come to take anything. Caleb understood. He lowered the flashlight, crouched slowly, and kept his voice quiet. "Easy, girl. I see them. I see you." The mother dog's eyes flicked from Caleb to Atlas, then back again. Her body remained locked over the puppies. Then Atlas did something Caleb had never seen him do in all their years together. The Malinois crawled forward only a few inches, stopped, and gently pushed Caleb's gray wool scarf across the frozen floor with his nose. The scarf slid until it rested just outside the mother dog's reach. She stared at it, nostrils trembling. For one suspended moment, the mine seemed to fall silent around them. Then the mother dog lowered her head, not in surrender, but in recognition of an offering. Caleb felt the air leave his lungs. Atlas had not brought him to a rescue. Atlas had brought him to a negotiation of trust. The first puppy moved beneath her. A small male with soft light brown fur and sandy paws pushed weakly against his mother's belly, his tiny black muzzle opening in a sound too thin to be called a cry. Another puppy, darker and smaller, lay curled like a shadow against her ribs, barely stirring. The third was the smallest of all, a tiny female with dark tan fur and a little white patch on her chest. She was half buried beneath the fold of her mother's body, her breathing so faint Caleb had to lean close to see it. "Okay," he whispered, one at a time. The mother dog tensed as Caleb reached forward. Her growl deepened. Caleb froze instantly and pulled his hand back. "Fair," he said softly. "You don't know me." Atlas remained low, eyes calm, body still. Caleb removed one glove and placed his bare hand flat on the ground, palm down, not reaching for her, just letting her smell him if she chose. The cold bit into his skin. The mother dog watched. Snowmelt dripped somewhere behind them, in slow, hollow taps. After a long moment, she stretched her nose forward just enough to catch his scent. She did not relax, but she did not bite. That was permission enough to begin. Caleb wrapped the scarf around the light brown puppy first. The little body was terrifyingly cold, fragile as a bird fallen from a nest. "You're the brave one, huh?" Caleb murmured, tucking him inside his coat. "Copper. That's what you look like." The name came without planning, maybe because the pup's sandy paws reminded him of a copper penny warmed in a child's hand. The mother dog's eyes followed every movement. Caleb moved slowly, deliberately, placing Copper against the inner warmth of his chest before reaching for the darker pup. This one barely responded when Caleb lifted him. His fur was black-brown, his face round and soft, his small ears folded tight against his head. "Ash," Caleb whispered, because the puppy looked like a coal ember that had nearly gone dark. Ash gave one faint twitch, and Caleb pressed him beside Copper, protecting both beneath the coat. The smallest puppy came last. Caleb's throat tightened when he touched her. She weighed almost nothing. The white patch on her chest rose and fell with a breath so shallow it felt like a secret. Atlas shifted then, a tiny movement, and gave a low, aching whine. Caleb looked at him. The Malinois' gaze was fixed on the little female. Of the three, Atlas had chosen the weakest, the one most likely to disappear if they moved too slowly. Caleb tucked her deeper inside his coat, close to his heart. "Penny," he said. "Stay with me, Penny." The name made something inside him hurt, because it sounded too small for a world this cruel. Now came the mother. Caleb studied the fallen board trapping her hind leg. It was part of an old support frame, heavy with ice, and wedged beneath a cracked crossbeam. If he pulled wrong, the whole pocket could shift. He set the flashlight on a rock. Beam angled toward the board, then looped part of the rope around the timber. Atlas rose carefully and moved to the side, watching the mother dog, ready but not threatening. "I'm going to lift it," Caleb told her. "It's going to hurt. I'm sorry." The apology surprised him. He had given orders under fire, spoken calmly over blood and panic, promised men evacuation when he was not sure evacuation would come. But apologizing to this broken, frightened dog in an abandoned mine felt more sacred than any command he had ever given. He braced one boot against the stone, pulled the rope, and lifted. The board shifted with a wet groan. The mother dog cried out, sharp and raw, and Caleb nearly stopped. Atlas barked once, not loud, but urgent. "Keep going." Caleb pulled harder. The board rose enough for the trapped leg to slide free. The mother dog collapsed forward, panting, trembling, eyes bright with pain. Caleb released the rope slowly, afraid the frame above them would follow. The beam held, for now. He moved toward her, with both arms open. She bared her teeth again, but the strength behind it was fading. Caleb stopped inches away. "You did your part," he whispered. "You kept them alive. Let me do mine." The mother dog looked at Atlas. Atlas stepped closer and touched his nose lightly to the side of her muzzle. It was brief, gentle, almost ceremonial. Something in her changed. Not trust, not fully. Trust was too expensive for a creature that had been abandoned in winter, but she allowed exhaustion to make the choice she could not. Caleb slid one arm beneath her chest and the other under her hips, careful of the injured leg. She was lighter than she should have been. A dog her size should have felt strong, solid, full of life. Instead, she felt like hunger wrapped in fur and willpower. When he lifted her, she shuddered but did not fight. Her head turned toward Caleb's coat, toward the hidden puppies, and she gave a weak sound that was more question than protest. "They're here," Caleb said. "All three." He did not know whether she understood the words, but he believed she understood his tone. The mine answered with a crack overhead. Caleb looked up. A thin line of dust fell from one of the crossbeams. Then another sound came from deeper in the passage, a slow wooden pop like a bone breaking under pressure. "Atlas," Caleb said, voice suddenly hard. "Move." The Malinois turned and led the way out, faster now but still careful. Caleb carried the mother dog against his chest, 3 puppies warming beneath his coat, and followed Atlas through the narrow side passage. Behind them, something shifted. A board fell. Dust rolled along the ground like smoke. Caleb's shoulder slammed into stone as he squeezed through the gap, pain flashing down his arm, but he did not loosen his hold on the mother. Atlas barked from ahead, guiding him left around the rotten floor, then right past the hanging tarp. The main tunnel came into view just as the side pocket collapsed with a heavy roar behind them. The sound chased them toward the entrance. Caleb kept moving. Snowlight appeared ahead, pale and violent. Atlas burst out first, turning immediately to face Caleb. Caleb stumbled through the mouth of the mine a second later, boots sliding on ice, knees nearly buckling beneath the weight of the dog in his arms. He dropped to one knee in the snow, but held her high, keeping her body from the frozen ground. The storm struck them again, wild and merciless, but it felt almost clean compared to the darkness behind them. For a moment, Caleb simply breathed. The mother dog lay limp against him, alive but barely. Beneath his coat, Copper moved. Ash gave a small, weak sound. Penny remained still until Atlas pressed his nose against Caleb's chest and whined. Caleb opened the coat just enough to check. The tiny female's white patch rose once, then again. "Good," he whispered, his voice rough. "Good girl." Atlas's ears suddenly snapped toward the tree line. Caleb followed his gaze. At first, he saw only snow, pines, and darkness. Then the flashlight beam caught something half buried beside a low brush near the old service path. Atlas stepped toward it and began digging with quick, precise movements. Caleb, still holding the mother dog, shifted closer and aimed the light. From beneath the snow, Atlas pulled free a child's purple glove. It was small, soaked, and stiff with cold, with a smear of mud across the palm and several dark strands of dog fur caught in the knit. Caleb stared at it, the warmth from the rescued puppies suddenly feeling terribly fragile. He had come for a sound in the mine. He had found a mother and 3 newborn lives. But the glove meant someone else had been here, someone small, someone who might still be missing. The mother dog lifted her head weakly when she smelled it and gave a broken whimper. Atlas took the glove gently in his mouth and looked toward the forest, then back at Caleb. The storm howled over Raven Creek, trying to erase every track, every scent, every truth. Caleb tightened his arms around the wounded dog and turned toward the distant shape of his cabin. "We get them warm first," he said, though the words felt like a promise already dividing in 2. "Then we find out who that belonged to." With Atlas leading through the blizzard, Caleb carried the mother and her 3 puppies away from the mine. While the purple glove swung softly from the canine's mouth like the first piece of a mystery, the mountain had not finished giving back. Caleb Mercer reached the cabin with his arms burning, his breath torn raw by the storm, and the wounded German shepherd held against his chest as if the whole mountain were trying to take her back. Atlas pushed through the snow ahead of him, the child's purple glove still held gently in his mouth, never biting down hard enough to damage it, never dropping it, as though some part of him understood that the small frozen thing mattered almost as much as the lives Caleb carried. The porch lantern swung wildly in the wind. Caleb shouldered the door open, stumbled inside, and brought the storm with him, in a rush of snow, cold air, and pine needles. The cabin, usually neat, in the severe way of a man who trusted order more than comfort, became a field hospital in less than a minute. Caleb laid the mother dog on the braided rug before the hearth, then opened his coat with shaking hands. Copper wriggled weakly against his sweater. Ash barely moved. Penny, the smallest, lay curled against the heat of his chest, with a little white patch on her fur, rising and falling so faintly. Caleb had to stare to believe it. Atlas dropped the purple glove on the table, then took position between the door and the rescued family. His tan vest was wet with melted snow, his black mask dusted white, his amber eyes fixed and alert. He was no longer leading a rescue. He was guarding one. Caleb threw 2 split logs into the fireplace, struck a match, and cursed under his breath when the first flame died. His hands had been steady under gunfire once, steady when men screamed for medics, steady when the world broke open around him. Now they fumbled over kindling because 3 puppies were breathing too softly and a mother dog was staring at him as though deciding whether kindness was just another kind of trap. The second match caught. Fire crawled through dry pine, orange light spreading over the room, touching the walls, the table, the scarred floorboards, and the green camouflage uniform Caleb still wore beneath his coat. He pulled towels from a shelf, warmed them near the flames, and wrapped the puppies one by one. Copper made a small protesting sound. Ash's body stayed frighteningly limp. Penny gave one tiny twitch when Atlas lowered his nose to her. "Stay with me," Caleb whispered. "All of you." The mother dog lifted her head at the sound of the puppies and tried to drag herself closer. Pain stopped her. Her injured hind leg trembled, swollen beneath the wet fur. Caleb placed the 3 pups against her belly, close enough for scent and warmth, but not so close that she might roll onto them in exhaustion. She sniffed each one with desperate little movements, counting them in the only way she could. When she reached Penny, her muzzle lingered. A soft sound came from her chest, not quite a whine, not quite a prayer. Caleb had no right to name her yet, but in his mind, the name Mara rose quietly, strong and sorrowful. A mother who would not move until her children were safe deserved a name that sounded like it had survived something. He grabbed his phone with fingers still stiff from cold and called the only person he trusted more with animals than himself. The line rang 5 times before a woman answered, her voice rough with sleep but instantly alert. "Bell Veterinary." "Naomi," Caleb said. "It's Mercer. I need you at my cabin." There was a pause, not hesitation, but calculation. "Doctor." Naomi Bell was 38, a field veterinarian with auburn brown hair she kept tied in a low, practical ponytail, warm hazel eyes that missed very little, and a calm, intelligent face that could turn stern when people mistook kindness for softness. She was slim but sturdy, the kind of woman who could kneel in mud beside a frightened horse for an hour, then stand up and tell a rancher exactly what he had done wrong without raising her voice. She had treated Atlas twice, once for a torn paw pad and once for an infection. Caleb blamed himself for not noticing sooner. Naomi had never treated Caleb like a broken veteran or a dangerous recluse. She treated him like a man who gave clear answers and hid the rest, which was closer to respect than most people offered. "What happened?" she asked. "German Shepherd, mother. 3 puppies, found in the old mine. Hypothermia, possible leg trauma. Mother's malnourished. 1 pup barely breathing." Naomi's voice changed. "I'm on my way. Keep them warm, but don't overheat them too fast. Do not force-feed the puppies. If the mother is conscious, keep them near her scent. I'll bring fluids and antibiotics. Road's bad. Then I'll drive slowly." The call ended before he could argue. Caleb looked at Atlas. "She always does that." Atlas did not blink. Outside, the storm hammered the windows. Inside, the mother dog watched Caleb with fever-bright eyes. He worked around her boundaries, cleaning ice from her coat with warm towels, stopping every time her lip lifted. He did not challenge the warning. He respected it. Trust was not something a man could demand from a creature he had just met in a collapsed tunnel. It had to be earned in inches, with hands that paused when fear asked them to. While he worked, his gaze kept returning to the purple glove on the table. It looked impossibly small beside the medical tape and radio parts. Child-sized, purple knit, 1 finger torn, mud across the palm, several dark strands of dog fur caught near the cuff. Caleb told himself children dropped things everywhere. He told himself the glove could have been lost weeks ago, blown there by wind, dragged by some animal. But Atlas had carried it like evidence. Mara had whimpered when she smelled it. And Caleb had learned the hard way that ignoring small signs was how nightmares found room to grow. Atlas suddenly left his guard position, crossed to the table, and nudged the purple glove until it slid to the floor. Then he picked it up, carried it gently to Mara, and placed it inches from her nose. The mother dog froze. Her whole body changed. Pain, fever, exhaustion, all of it seemed to fall behind one older recognition. She sniffed the glove once, then pressed her muzzle against it and made a broken sound so human in its grief that Caleb felt the room tilt. Atlas looked up at him, eyes steady. Not a threat, not a scent trail, a message. Someone small had mattered to this dog. Headlights cut across the frosted window just before midnight. Caleb opened the door to find Naomi Bell stepping through the storm in a dark teal insulated veterinary field jacket, gray thermal sweater, dark utility pants, and waterproof brown boots. Snow clung to her ponytail and shoulders. In one hand, she carried a black veterinary medical bag. In the other, a portable thermal case. Her cheeks were red from the cold, but her expression was focused, not frightened. "Move the coffee table," she said by way of greeting. Caleb obeyed. Naomi knelt beside Mara. Not too close at first. "Hello, beautiful," she murmured. "You've had a brutal night, haven't you?" Mara watched her with distrust, but Naomi did not reach immediately. She let the dog smell the back of her hand, then began her examination slowly. Caleb stood by the hearth, arms folded tight, every muscle in his body wanting to help and every instinct knowing he would only get in the way unless asked. Naomi checked gum color, body temperature, pulse, hydration, the injured hind leg, and the puppies one by one. Copper squirmed when she touched his belly, which Naomi said was a good sign. Ash needed warmth and careful monitoring. Penny made Naomi's face tighten for half a second before she smoothed it away. "This little one is the edge case," Naomi said quietly. "But she's fighting." Atlas stepped closer to Penny, then lay down beside the towel basket as if the decision had been made. Naomi noticed. "He chose her?" "Seems that way," Caleb said. "Then listen to him," Naomi replied. "Dogs like Atlas don't waste concern." She cleaned Mara's wound with sterile solution, trimmed away a strip of matted fur near the leg, and gave medication with careful explanation. Not because Caleb needed every detail, but because fear became less wild when it had tasks to hold. The leg was badly bruised, possibly strained, but not obviously broken. The bigger dangers were infection, exposure, and exhaustion. "She's been underfed for weeks," Naomi said, her voice low. "Maybe longer. The collar marks are old." Someone kept her restrained. Caleb looked toward the fire, his jaw hardened. Naomi saw the broken metal tag still attached to the cracked collar and leaned closer. Her brows drew together. "Where did this come from?" "On her." Naomi lifted the tag with gloved fingers. Only part of the engraving remained under scratches and corrosion. HR, maybe an N, and the edge of a number. Her expression shifted from concern to recognition. "Haven Ridge," she said. Caleb turned. "What?" Haven Ridge Working Dogs. It used to operate outside town. Protection training, search dogs, service placements, all very polished on paper. Closed 2 years ago after complaints no one could prove. Complaints about what? Naomi looked at Mara, then at the 3 puppies. Dogs disappearing from records. Sick ones, old ones. Females that had been bred too many times. "I heard rumors, but rumors don't save animals in court." Caleb's eyes moved to the glove. "And children?" Naomi's face went still. Before she could answer, another knock came at the door, softer than Naomi's arrival, but somehow more determined. June Whitaker entered without waiting for permission, because June had never believed Caleb's loneliness was a locked gate she needed to respect. She was 72, small in frame, but strong as a fence post, sunk deep into mountain ground. Her silver-gray hair was tied in a loose bun beneath a burgundy-knitted hat, and her deeply lined face carried the weathered kindness of someone who had suffered without letting suffering become cruelty. She wore a heavy brown wool coat over a faded green dress, a gray scarf wrapped twice around her neck, and practical dark winter boots dusted with snow. In her arms were folded blankets, a thermos, and a covered pot. "I saw Dr. Bell's truck pass my window like Judgment Day," June said. Figured either you were bleeding or something innocent was. Her eyes found Mara and the puppies. The sharpness in her face softened. Oh, Lord. Caleb opened his mouth to tell her the roads were unsafe, but June gave him a look that ended the sentence before it began. Don't waste breath telling me what I shouldn't do. I married a miner and buried him. I know what unsafe looks like. She set the pot on the stove and the blankets near the fire. Naomi gave her a grateful nod and kept working. June moved with quiet efficiency, warming towels, refilling water, and placing the thermos where Caleb could reach it. Drink, she told him. I'm fine. No, you're vertical. Men confuse that with fine all the time. Caleb almost answered, but Copper sneezed, a tiny wet sound that startled Ash and made Penny twitch. For the first time that night, something like life moved through the room without fear attached to it. June smiled faintly. There now. Even a bad night can be interrupted by a ridiculous little miracle. Caleb looked away before anyone saw what that sentence did to him. Hours passed in small measured acts. Naomi administered fluids under Mara's skin, showed Caleb how to keep the puppies warm without overheating them, and warned him not to let Mara stand unless necessary. June sat near the hearth, humming an old hymn under her breath while she rubbed warmth into a towel. Atlas stayed beside Penny, rising only when Caleb moved too close to the door, then settling again when no threat appeared. The cabin changed around them. It was still Caleb's cabin, the same stone hearth, the same rough table, the same walls that had listened to 2 years of silence, but now it held breath, need, and purpose. Mara finally drank from a bowl when Caleb turned his back, pretending not to watch. That tiny sound, her tongue touching water, seemed to fill the room more deeply than the wind outside. Naomi picked up the purple glove with tweezers and examined the inside cuff. The writing was faint, almost washed away, but under the lantern light 3 letters showed an uneven childlike marker, L, P. Naomi's face tightened again. June saw it. What is it? Maybe nothing, Naomi said, too carefully. Caleb hated careful voices. Say it. Naomi looked from the glove to Mara. There's a girl in town, Lillian Porter, 9 years old, pale little thing, short light brown hair, big blue eyes, quiet, always watching animals like she understands them better than people. Her mother, Carla, used to clean kennels at Haven Ridge before it closed. June's hand stilled on the towel. Lily hasn't been at school. Naomi nodded slowly. Carla told people she was staying with relatives after the storm warning. I didn't think much of it. Mara stirred at the sound of Naomi's voice, not because she understood the name, but because the glove's scent remained near her. She reached her muzzle toward it, weak and urgent. Atlas lifted his head at the same time and looked toward the north-facing window, toward the dark mountain beyond. Caleb felt the old cold open in his chest again, but this time it was not memory alone. It was warning. He looked at Mara, at the puppies, at the glove, at Atlas. The pieces did not yet form a picture, but they were no longer separate. Naomi lowered her voice. Caleb, I'm not saying the glove means she was at the mine, but if it does, then someone else was out there, Caleb finished. June crossed herself quietly, not dramatically, just an old gesture from a woman who had learned that faith sometimes began where evidence ended. Caleb moved to the window. Snow struck the glass so hard it sounded like sand. Beyond it, Raven Creek Mountain was invisible, but he could feel it waiting. Behind him, Mara gave another weak whimper and pulled the purple glove closer with her muzzle. Atlas stood. The fire cracked. No one spoke for several seconds. Caleb finally turned back to Naomi and June, his face calm in the way it became when fear had no more room to show. Keep them alive tonight, he said. At first light, we find out who that glove belongs to. Atlas remained standing beside him, facing the window, as if he already knew the answer was still somewhere under the snow. Morning did not arrive at Raven Creek with sunlight. It came gray and exhausted, pressing against the cabin windows through layers of frost, while the storm rested only long enough to make the world listen. Caleb Mercer had not slept. He sat on the floor near the hearth, back against the couch, still wearing the green digital camouflage uniform that had dried stiff at the cuffs from melted snow. His angular face looked sharper in the firelight, his clean-shaven jaw locked with the kind of quiet tension that came from staying awake too long with too much at stake. Atlas lay beside him, the Belgian Malinois' deep fawn to mahogany coat warmed by the fire. his black mask still marked by faint salt lines from dried snow. The K9 did not sleep either. Every few minutes, his upright ears shifted toward the door, then toward the wounded German Shepherd mother resting on the rug. The mother dog, now called Mara in Caleb's mind, though he had not yet spoken the name aloud in front of everyone, lay with her injured hind legs stretched carefully on a folded towel. Her black and tan fur had been cleaned enough to reveal how thin she truly was. Copper and ash were tucked against her belly, making tiny, restless sounds as they searched for warmth. Penny, the smallest, remained in a towel-lined basket close to Atlas, because every time Naomi Bell tried to move her farther away, Atlas rose with a low, worried whine until the veterinarian gave him the look. One professional gave another and said, "Fine, you're on nursery watch." Naomi sat at the kitchen table, her auburn brown hair loose from its low ponytail, hazel eyes red with fatigue but still precise. The sleeves of her dark teal field jacket were pushed up, and a page of handwritten notes lay in front of her. Temperature checks, fluid times, wound observations, breathing intervals. June Whittaker stood at the stove in her heavy brown wool coat and burgundy hat, warming broth no one had asked for but everyone needed. Her small frame seemed almost too slight for the stubbornness she carried, but June had the kind of mountain strength that did not announce itself. She moved around Caleb's cabin as if grief had taught her that no room was truly private when something innocent was fighting to live. On the table, separate from the medical supplies, lay the purple glove. It had dried enough for the faint marker inside the cuff to show more clearly. LP. Caleb kept looking at it, then looking away. A child's glove should not have felt heavier than rope, timber, or a wounded dog, but it did. The first knock came just after 7. 3 firm strikes. Not June's rhythm, not Naomi's. Official. Atlas rose before the second knock landed, silent and straight, his tan vest shifting against his lean body. Caleb was already standing. His body moved faster than his thoughts, old training traveling through muscle before reason had time to speak. Mara lifted her head, ears uneven, amber brown eyes suddenly sharp despite fever and exhaustion. Copper squeaked. Ash pressed closer to his mother. Penny did not wake, but Atlas stepped between the door and the basket. Caleb opened the door only halfway. On the porch stood Deputy Grant Holloway, a 45-year-old county deputy with a weathered square face, close-trimmed beard, short dark blonde hair flattened by a winter cap, and steady gray eyes that looked tired before they looked suspicious. He wore a dark brown county sheriff winter jacket over a tan uniform shirt, dark duty pants, black boots crusted with snow, and a simple sheriff badge pinned to his chest. There was no weapon visible, which Caleb noticed first, and no softness in his posture, which Caleb noticed second. Behind him stood a younger woman from County Animal Control, maybe late 20s, short and sturdy, with medium brown skin, black hair tucked under a knit cap, and anxious eyes that kept moving from Caleb's face to the open door. Her name patch read M. Ruiz. She carried a clipboard and a collapsible animal crate, though the crate remained folded at her side. Grant removed his cap, not out of friendliness, but respect for a threshold. "Caleb Mercer? You know it is." Grant's eyes flicked once past Caleb, catching the firelight, Naomi's medical bag, June by the stove, Atlas standing ready, and the wounded dog on the rug. "We received a report." Caleb's hand tightened on the doorframe. "About what?" "A dangerous, unregistered canine being held on this property. Possibly stolen? Possibly connected to an old working dog facility." The words landed hard enough to change the temperature of the room. Behind Caleb, Mara gave a low sound, not a growl yet, but close. Atlas did not move, though his body became a line of controlled power. Naomi stood. "Deputy, that dog is under emergency veterinary care." "She is not being moved." Grant looked at Naomi and gave a small nod. "Dr. Bell." His voice was careful. "I'm not here to make a medical decision over your head." Caleb opened the door wider, but his face had gone cold. "Then why are you here?" Grant stepped inside slowly, wiping his boots before crossing the threshold. Ruiz followed but stopped near the door, her grip tight around the clipboard. Grant looked at Mara, then the puppies. Something shifted in his expression, a quiet human reaction he suppressed quickly. Because someone made the report before sunrise, they gave details. Female shepherd, 3 pups, injured. Claimed she was taken from private property. Naomi's jaw tightened. June turned from the stove with the ladle still in her hand. And you believe them? Grant did not flinch. I believed it needed checking. Before anyone could answer, Atlas walked to the table, picked up the purple glove, and carried it across the room. He did not bring it to Caleb. He did not bring it to Naomi. He placed it at Deputy Grant Holloway's boots, then stepped back and sat perfectly still, staring up at the deputy like a witness waiting to be sworn in. Grant's face changed. Not much, just enough. His eyes dropped to the glove, to the tiny letters inside the cuff, and for the first time since entering the cabin, he looked less like a man answering a complaint, and more like a man realizing the complaint had arrived to bury something. Naomi bent and picked up the glove before Ruiz could step closer. "We found this near the mine entrance last night," she said. Atlas found it. Grant's gray eyes sharpened. "Near Raven Creek Mine?" "Yes," Caleb said. "After I pulled her and the pups out." Grant looked toward Mara again. "You went into the mine during the storm?" Atlas heard them. That is not an answer most people would accept. Caleb's eyes were flat. Most people weren't there. June made a small sound that might have been approval. Ruiz, the animal control officer, finally spoke, her voice soft but professional. "Deputy, if the mother is unstable, transport could put her at risk. The puppies too. We can document in place." Naomi gave her a quick grateful glance. Grant crouched several feet from Mara, careful not to reach toward her. He was not a fool. Mara's body stiffened anyway, and her lip lifted enough to show teeth. Caleb immediately stepped closer, but Grant raised one hand, palm out, not toward the dog, toward Caleb. "I'm not touching her." Atlas remained between them, eyes locked on Grant. The deputy studied him. "That your Malinois?" "Yes." "Military?" "Was." Grant nodded, as if that explained both the dog's discipline and Caleb's lack of patience. He pulled a small notebook from his jacket. "I need facts. When did you find the shepherd?" "Last night, around midnight." "Where exactly?" "Old side entrance above the service road." "Any tags?" Naomi lifted the broken metal piece from the table with gloved fingers. "Partial, possibly Haven Ridge." At the name, Grant's pen stopped. June noticed. Caleb did too. "You know it," Caleb said. Grant exhaled through his nose. "Everyone in this county knows Haven Ridge. Knowing and proving are different things." Naomi set the tag down beside her notes. "She has collar scarring consistent with restraint. She is malnourished, hypothermic, and injured. This is neglect, at minimum." "I'm not arguing that," Grant said. "But if someone claims ownership, the county has to document." Caleb gave a short laugh with no humor. "Ownership. She was dying under timber with 3 puppies. And if the person who put her there is already trying to claim her, then we have to be smarter than anger." That stopped Caleb for half a second. Grant stood, his weathered face hard but not cruel. "Listen to me. I didn't come here to take your family away." The word family hit Caleb before he could guard against it. Grant continued, quieter. "I came because somebody is trying to turn them into a paperwork problem before they become evidence." The cabin fell silent, except for the fire and the faint, wet breathing of the puppies. June set the ladle down. Naomi folded her arms. Caleb looked at Grant with suspicion still alive in every line of his body, but now there was something else beneath it. Attention. Grant turned to Ruiz. "Photograph the dog from here. No flash, no approach. Document the condition of the pups and the visible collar mark. Dr. Bell's medical notes attached to the file." Ruiz nodded, visibly relieved to have a humane instruction. She moved carefully, staying near Naomi and speaking softly each time she raised the camera. Grant looked back at Caleb. "We've had 3 strange vehicle reports near the old Haven Ridge property in the last month. 2 near the lower mine access road, 1 by your ridge." Naomi's face tightened. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because until now, they were just complaints about trucks. No plates, no clear description, and Haven Ridge is technically closed." "Technically?" Caleb asked. Grant's mouth pressed into a thin line. "The property changed hands through a shell company after the closure. The owner of record is almost impossible to reach. The old manager, Hank Rusk, still shows up around town when something needs moving and no questions need asking." June's face darkened at the name. Rusk has the conscience of a locked shed. Grant glanced at her. That is one way to put it. Naomi picked up the glove again. There's more. The initials inside are LP. Lillian Porter has not been at school. Grant's expression shifted immediately. Who told you that? I heard it from Mrs. Keller at the clinic yesterday. She said Carla claimed Lily was staying with relatives because of the storm. Grant took out his phone. Carla Porter? Yes, Naomi said. She used to clean kennels at Haven Ridge. Grant stepped closer to the window where reception sometimes reached better. His voice dropped as he made the call, but Caleb heard enough. School attendance, welfare check, relatives, confirmation. While Grant waited, Mara stirred again. The purple glove was now in Naomi's hand, but Mara's nose followed it weakly. She tried to rise. Pain dropped her back down. Caleb knelt at once. Easy. Mara's amber eyes did not look at him. They looked at the glove. Then, toward the north-facing window. Atlas looked the same direction. Caleb felt the old warning return, colder than the storm. Grant ended the call slowly. His face had gone still in a way Caleb understood too well. Men looked like that when a situation changed shape under their feet. No relatives picked Lily up, Grant said. School hasn't seen her in 3 days. Carla didn't file a missing child report. Naomi whispered, "Oh God." June closed her eyes. Ruiz lowered the camera, her professional mask slipping into shock. Caleb stood. Then we go back. Grant turned on him. Not like that. We do this correctly. A child's glove was outside the mine, and we need to establish facts before we contaminate a scene. Caleb stepped closer, his blue-gray eyes hard. I have heard that sentence before. I heard men wait for permission while a child was still breathing. The room went tense. Grant did not back down, but his voice softened by 1 degree. And I have seen rushed men turn rescues into recoveries because they refused structure. We are not enemies here. Atlas moved between them, not aggressively, but with enough presence to remind both men what the stakes were. Penny made a tiny sound from the basket. Mara answered with a weak whimper, still reaching toward the glove. That sound did what argument could not. It cut through pride. Grant looked at Naomi. Can she be left? Not alone, Naomi said. But with me and June? Yes, for a short time. She needs warmth, fluids, and quiet. The puppies need monitoring. June nodded. I'll keep the fire alive. Caleb looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. June had kept fires alive before, for minors, for widows, for stubborn men who did not know how to ask. Grant began issuing instructions. Ruiz would remain long enough to finish documentation, then return to the station and flag the case. Grant would call in a welfare check for Carla Porter and request backup for the mine search, but the storm and road conditions meant help could be slow. Caleb hated every second of delay, but he forced himself to breathe. Atlas watched him closely. The dog had dragged him toward one cry already. Now there was another, buried not in sound, but in evidence. Naomi packed a smaller field kit and handed Caleb a thermal blanket. If you find anything that belongs to Lily, don't pocket it. Mark it. Photograph it. Grant is right about one thing. Evidence matters if someone is trying to hide her. Caleb nodded once. It cost him more than he wanted to admit. Grant stepped to the door, then paused and looked back at Mara. If Haven Ridge is tied to this, whoever filed that report may have done it to get her removed before she could connect them to something worse. Mara lowered her head over her puppies, exhausted but alert. Atlas stood beside Caleb, facing the door. The purple glove lay in a clear evidence bag now, the small letters L.P. visible through plastic. Caleb stared at it, and the boy from his memory flashed once behind his eyes. A small hand, a missed signal, a silence that followed. He closed his fist and opened it again. Not this time. The storm began to rise outside, rattling the window panes as if the mountain objected to being searched. Caleb opened the door and stepped into the gray morning with Atlas at his side and Grant just behind him. Behind them, June's voice followed from the hearth, low but steady. Bring back the truth, Caleb. And if there's a child out there, bring her back too. Caleb did not turn around. He could not. He only looked toward the invisible mine beyond the pines and said, "We will." The chapter ends with Caleb, Atlas, and Deputy Grant leaving the cabin to return to Raven Creek Mine, while Naomi and June stay behind to keep Mara and the puppies alive beside the fire. The road back to Raven Creek Mine had nearly vanished by the time Caleb Mercer, Atlas, and Deputy Grant Holloway reached the old service trail. Morning should have brought relief, but the sky remained low and iron gray, pressing against the mountain as if the storm had only stepped back to gather strength. Caleb drove his old black truck with both hands tight on the wheel, his green digital camouflage uniform dry now but creased from a sleepless night, his sharp jaw set in a line that made conversation feel unnecessary. Atlas sat in the passenger seat, the Belgian Malinois still wearing his tan tactical vest, body upright, ears forward, eyes fixed through the windshield. He did not pace, whine, or scratch. His stillness was worse. It meant he had found a purpose and would not release it. Grant followed in his county vehicle, lights off, tires cutting slowly through the packed snow. When they stopped below the ridge, Grant stepped out in his dark brown winter uniform jacket, face weathered by cold gray eyes scanning the trees. He carried a radio, a camera, evidence flags, and a coil of rope. He looked less like a man answering a complaint now, and more like a deputy who knew the mountain had just handed him the first real thread in a case no one had wanted to pull. "We mark everything," Grant said. "We photograph before we touch. We do not go deeper than the structure allows." Caleb shut the truck door and looked toward the mine. "If there's a child out here, structure can wait." Grant's eyes hardened, but his voice stayed level. "No, panic waits. Structure keeps people alive long enough to be rescued." Caleb hated that he was right. He clipped Atlas's leash, took the sealed purple glove from the evidence pouch Grant had allowed him to carry only because Atlas needed the scent, and knelt in the snow. "Find," he said softly. Atlas lowered his nose to the glove, inhaled once, then turned away from the mine entrance, not toward the tunnel where Mara had been found, not toward the path Caleb expected. He faced the old storage road that curved behind a line of frost-heavy pines. Caleb and Grant exchanged a look. "That's not the mine," Grant said. "No," Caleb replied. "That's where he says she went." Atlas led them away from the side entrance and toward an abandoned storage shed half hidden beneath snow and pine branches. The building had once served the mining company, a long, low structure made of gray boards, rusted tin roofing, and warped doors chained shut so loosely that a child could have squeezed through the gap. Caleb had seen it from a distance before and dismissed it as another dead piece of Raven Creek history. Up close, it did not feel dead. The snow in front of it had been disturbed before the latest fall. Grant crouched, photographing the uneven marks. "Small boot prints," he said, "partially filled. Could be yesterday, could be older." Caleb stood very still. Atlas sniffed along the lower edge of the door, then pushed his nose into the gap and gave a short, urgent huff. Grant cut the old wire holding the chain, careful to bag the rusted twist as possible evidence, then eased the door open. The smell inside was dust, cold wood, old oil, and something faintly human. Caleb entered first with the flashlight low. Grant did not argue this time, only followed close enough to cover the corners with his own beam. The shed held broken tool racks, stacks of rotting boards, collapsed shelves, and mining equipment left behind like bones after a body had been stripped. Atlas moved through the room without hesitation. Near the back wall, he stopped beside a pile of burlap sacks and sat. Caleb moved the top sack aside and found a crushed water bottle, a torn granola wrapper, and a small piece of cream-colored yarn caught on a nail. Grant photographed each item. "A kid could have sheltered here," he said. "For how long?" Caleb asked. Grant did not answer. His silence was worse than a guess. They found the drawings on the inside of an old plank door that had fallen behind a workbench. At first, Caleb thought the marks were scratches from tools, but Atlas kept pawing gently near the lower corner until Caleb knelt and angled the flashlight. Lines of black charcoal formed a child's uneven picture, a large dog with pointed ears, 3 small round shapes beneath her, and a girl standing beside them with one oversized hand extended. Under the drawing, written in crooked letters, were the words, "Mara is brave." Caleb stared at the sentence until the cold around him seemed to move inside his ribs. He had given the mother dog a name in his own mind before anyone else had said it. Now here it was, written by a child who had known her first. Grant crouched beside him, face grim. "That connects Lily to the dog," Caleb touched nothing. His hand hovered near the plank, then closed into a fist. She was here. Atlas's tail moved once, not wagging, not happy, simply confirming what the men were finally catching up to. Grant photographed the drawing from multiple angles. "This is no longer just animal neglect. It never was," Caleb said. Behind the workbench, Grant found a folded paper swollen with moisture and stuck to the floorboards. He eased it loose with a gloved hand and opened it carefully. Most of the writing had blurred, but a logo remained at the top: Haven Ridge, Working Dogs. Beneath it were partial entries, dog codes, transfer marks, and handwritten notes. One line was still readable: K17F, pregnant female relocate through lower mine access. Caleb's eyes cut to Grant. K17, Mara's tag. Grant's jaw tightened. Maybe? Grant looked at him. Maybe is how we keep evidence strong enough to hold. But yes, Caleb, it looks like her. Atlas suddenly turned toward a boarded section of the rear wall and let out a low growl. From behind that wall came a sound so faint, both men froze before they understood they had heard it. Not a voice, not clearly. A tap, then another. 3 weak knocks, spaced unevenly, from somewhere beneath the shed. Atlas stepped forward, every muscle in his body drawn tight, and pressed his black muzzle against the boards. Caleb's flashlight shook for the first time that morning. The child's drawing was not a memory. It might be a map. Grant moved fast now, controlled but urgent. He checked the rear wall and found that the boards covered an old access hatch half buried behind storage debris. "Lower mine access," he said. The old ventilation and tool route. Caleb was already pulling boards aside. Grant grabbed his wrist. "Photographs first." Caleb's eyes flashed. "You heard that." "I did. And if we rip this apart wrong, we might collapse whatever is behind it." The truth of it hit hard. Caleb forced himself back one step. Grant photographed the hatch, the broken latch, the scuffed floor around it, and a smear of mud that looked newer than the rest of the shed. Atlas whined, high and restrained, then pawed once at the floor. "Easy," Caleb said, though his own blood was pounding so loudly he could barely hear. Grant tried the hatch. It did not open. The wood had swollen, and something heavy blocked it from below or behind. He leaned closer, listening. Caleb held his breath. Nothing came. Then, Atlas turned sharply toward the front of the shed. A second later, Caleb heard it too. An engine outside, low and rough, moving slowly along the ridge road. Grant killed his flashlight and motioned Caleb down. Through a crack in the boards, they saw a dark pickup truck stop near the upper bend. It had no front plate visible, its windows were tinted, and one rear fender was patched with primer gray metal. The driver remained inside, shape hidden, engine idling. Grant's face changed with recognition. "That truck's been reported near Haven Ridge." Caleb's hand went to the leash, not because Atlas needed restraint, but because his own body wanted to move. "We take him." Grant shook his head once. "Not with a possible child under our feet." The truck sat for 10 long seconds. Then the driver revved the engine and pulled away, leaving only a fading growl and tire marks the storm was already trying to soften. Caleb's whole body strained after it. Atlas did not. Atlas stayed facing the hatch. That decided it. Grant radioed in their location, requested backup, and reported a possible trapped juvenile near the old mine storage shed. Static broke across the channel. The dispatcher's voice came through thin and broken, saying the main road was partially blocked by a fallen pine, and response would be delayed. Grant cursed softly, not dramatically, just enough for Caleb to know the deputy was afraid too. "We need to confirm before we enter," Grant said. He took a small folding pry bar from his kit and worked the edge of the hatch carefully. Caleb cleared debris, moving each board only after Grant documented it. The old wood finally shifted with a wet groan. A breath of cold air rose from below, carrying damp stone, rot, and the faintest trace of something that made Atlas tremble. Not fear, recognition. Caleb lowered his flashlight through the gap. A narrow set of old stairs descended into darkness, partly blocked by collapsed boards. On one step lay another piece of purple yarn. Farther down, there was a small muddy handprint on the wall. Caleb stopped breathing. Grant saw it and looked away for half a second, as if collecting himself. "Lily," Caleb whispered. The name felt different now. Not a possibility. A person. A child with frightened blue eyes, short light brown hair, and enough courage to follow a wounded dog into a storm because adults had failed to protect what she loved. Caleb started down, but Grant caught his sleeve again. Rope. Radio. Mark the entrance. Atlas stays on lead. Caleb's first instinct was anger. His second was memory. Men rushing into unstable structures and never coming out. He swallowed both. Fine. They tied a safety line to a heavy support post that still seemed solid, looped another around Caleb's waist, and clipped Atlas's leash short enough to keep him from bolting beyond reach. Grant handed Caleb a spare radio. You go 6 steps. Stop. I check the wall. We move together. You coming? A child may be down there, Grant said. Of course I'm coming. That answer changed something small between them. Not trust, not yet, but the shape of a bridge. Atlas went first, slow and careful. The stairs creaked under Caleb's boots. The darkness below pressed upward like water. He could hear the mind breathing again. He could hear the boy in his memory too, but quieter now, pushed back by the real evidence of a real child who might still be found. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage turned toward the old lower access tunnel. The walls were close, reinforced with timber that had darkened from age and moisture. Grant marked the turn with orange tape. Caleb swept the light left and found another sign. A child's boot print in dried mud, small, partial, pointing deeper in. Beside it, scratched into the dust, were 3 short lines, then a shaky arrow. Grant stared. She was leaving herself a trail. Caleb's throat tightened. Smart kid. Atlas suddenly stopped and gave one sharp bark into the dark. A reply came after a long second. Not words. A faint sound. Maybe a cry. Maybe a breath hitting wood. Caleb went cold from head to toe. Grant lifted the radio. Dispatch, we have probable confirmation. Possible live juvenile below Old Raven Creek storage shed. Need rescue and medical as soon as the road clears. Static answered. Then a voice. Copy, deputy. Delayed but en route. Caleb did not wait for the rest. He looked at Atlas. The Malinois' ears were forward, body trembling with contained urgency. But he held position because Caleb had told him to. That obedience nearly broke Caleb's heart. Good boy, Caleb whispered. Take us to her. The passage ended at a partly collapsed service door made of old planks reinforced with rusted metal straps. Behind it, something shifted. Caleb crouched close. Lily? He called. Not loudly, afraid the vibration might loosen the structure. Lily Ann Porter. My name is Caleb. I'm here with Deputy Holloway. We found Mara. Silence. Then the faintest scrape. Grant leaned in. Lily, if you can hear us, tap once. For a moment, nothing. Caleb felt the old horror opening, the space between a call and no answer. Then, one weak tap came from the other side. Naomi's words from the cabin echoed in his mind. If it does mean she was there. Caleb closed his eyes once. When he opened them, he was not in the past. He was here, under Raven Creek, with Atlas beside him and Grant at his shoulder. Grant's voice was low. We don't break through until we brace this frame. If she's behind it, we do not risk bringing the ceiling down on her. Caleb nodded, though every part of him wanted to tear the door apart with his hands. Atlas stepped closer to the gap at the bottom and pushed his nose near it. From the other side came a tiny sound, a child trying not to cry too loudly. Atlas lowered himself to the floor, stretched one paw under the gap as far as it would go, and lay still. Caleb watched through the narrow beam of the flashlight as, after several seconds, a small dirty finger touched the tips of Atlas's paw from the other side. Grant looked at Caleb, and neither man spoke. They did not need to. Lily was alive. The chapter ends with Caleb, Atlas, and Deputy Grant kneeling outside the blocked lower access door beneath the storage shed, knowing Lily is trapped on the other side while the rescue team is still delayed by the storm. Caleb Mercer stayed on his knees before the blocked service door, one hand braced against the cold timber, the other resting near Atlas's shoulder, as the Belgian Malinois lay flat with one paw stretched beneath the gap. On the other side, a small dirty finger touched Atlas's paw again, weak but real. That tiny contact did more to the men than any radio confirmation could have. Deputy Grant Holloway crouched beside Caleb, his weathered square face drawn tight, gray eyes fixed on the narrow space under the door. "Lily," Grant said carefully, keeping his voice low so the old boards would not vibrate too hard. "My name is Deputy Holloway. We're going to get you out, but we need you to stay still. Can you do that?" There was silence, then one faint tap. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. One tap meant yes. One tap meant alive. One tap meant the mountain had not taken her yet. Atlas did not move his paw away. His dark amber eyes remained focused on the gap, his lean body trembling with restraint, not fear. Caleb understood that tremble. It was the agony of discipline when every instinct screamed to break through. The lower passage around them was narrow, reinforced by old blackened beams, slick with moisture. The air smelled of wet stone, rotting wood, old oil, and the faint sour trace of someone trapped too long in the cold. Grant checked the frame around the door, running his flashlight along cracks in the timber. "We can't just pry it open. The top brace is carrying weight." Caleb looked at the beam above the door. A hairline fracture ran through it, dusting the frame with gray powder. "How long until rescue?" Grant lifted his radio. Static answered before words did. The dispatcher's voice came thin and broken. "Road crew still clearing the fallen pine. Rescue delayed. Medical staged behind the lower bridge." Grant's mouth tightened. Caleb knew that look. It was the look of a man being asked by time to make a decision paperwork could not protect. "We brace it ourselves," Caleb said. "With what?" Grant asked. Caleb swept his flashlight along the tunnel wall. Old boards, rusted brackets, a metal pipe, broken tool handles, a collapsed shelf, half buried in dust. Not ideal. Enough. With what the mine left us. Grant studied him for a moment, then nodded. Together. No hero nonsense. Caleb almost smiled, but the sound behind the door stopped him. A child's breath hitched. Atlas whined once, low and aching. Caleb leaned close to the gap. "Lily, we found Mara." A tiny sound came back. Not a word at first, just a broken little sob. Then a voice, thin as thread. "She had babies?" Caleb swallowed. 3. Copper, Ash, and Penny. They're warm. She's alive. For several seconds, the only sound was Lily crying softly in the dark. They worked with careful urgency. Grant drove a metal pipe into place as a temporary side brace, while Caleb wedged old boards beneath the cracked beam, testing each one with controlled pressure. Atlas remained near the gap, sometimes shifting his paw so Lily could feel him still there. Caleb spoke to her between movements. Not too much, not falsely cheerful, just enough to keep her anchored. Lily Ann Porter, now more than initials on a glove, answered in fragments. She was 9 years old. She had short, light brown hair, though Caleb could only imagine it tangled and damp in the dark. She had been wearing a purple winter coat, one glove lost near the mine when she followed Mara. She had brought a water bottle, 2 granola bars, and a small flashlight that had died sometime in the night. Her voice carried fear, but also a stubborn gentleness that made Caleb understand why a wounded dog had trusted her. Lily said she had seen a man loading Mara into a dark truck near the old Haven Ridge property. Mara had escaped when the truck door was opened near the service road. Lily had followed because she knew Mara was pregnant, and because, in the simple, fierce logic of a child, someone had to make sure the dog was not alone. She found the shed, heard Mara crying deeper near the mine, tried to follow. Then the lower door jammed, and part of the passage shifted behind her. "I made arrows," Lily whispered. "So Mom could find me." Grant looked down, grief flashing across his face before he covered it. Caleb's chest tightened so hard it hurt. He remembered another child trying to explain danger with a hand, a look, a sound he had not understood quickly enough. This time he understood every sign. Naomi Bell's voice crackled over Grant's radio from the cabin, patched through by dispatch for a moment. The veterinarian's voice was calm but tired. "Grant, Caleb, status?" Grant answered. "Live contact. Juvenile conscious. Cold. Trapped behind lower access door. We're bracing before extraction." Naomi exhaled audibly. "Keep her talking. Watch for confusion. If she gets drowsy, get her responding." "Mara's stable for now. Puppy's still alive." Caleb closed his hand around the radio. "Penny?" There was a pause, softer this time. "Still fighting." Atlas was right about her. Atlas lifted his head at his name, then immediately lowered it back toward Lily. Even under the mountain, he seemed to understand he was holding two fragile ends of the same promise. Just as Caleb set the final brace, Atlas suddenly rose and turned away from Lily's door. His posture changed in an instant, ears locked, tail still, body angled toward the deeper service passage behind them. It was not the alert he had given for Lily. This was threat. Grant saw it too, and killed his flashlight with one sharp motion. In the darkness, far down the tunnel, another beam appeared, not rescue lights, not steady and searching, but a single narrow flashlight moving fast, as if someone who knew the mine had come back for something he was terrified to leave behind. Grant drew closer to the wall and motioned Caleb down. Caleb kept one hand on Atlas's vest. The approaching light swung across beams, vanished, then returned. Footsteps scraped on stone. A man muttered a curse under his breath. When he rounded the bend, Caleb saw him clearly in the split second before Grant turned his light on. Hank Rusk was 52, heavyset, with a hard, weathered face, thinning gray-brown hair, narrow, suspicious eyes, rough stubble, and the defensive posture of a man who had spent years blaming other people for the consequences of his own choices. He wore a dark canvas work jacket over a dirty gray thermal shirt, faded work pants, and muddy black boots. In one hand, he carried a flashlight. In the other, a damp folder wrapped in plastic. His face went bloodless when he saw Grant. "Deputy," Hank said, voice rough. "This is private property." Grant stood slowly. "A child is trapped behind this door." Hank's eyes flicked toward the blocked access, then away too quickly. "I don't know anything about that." Caleb stepped into the light, and Hank saw the uniform, the cold blue-gray eyes, the way Atlas stood at Caleb's side without needing a command. Hank took half a step back. Grant's voice hardened. "Put the folder down." Hank's jaw worked. "You don't understand what you're stepping into. Those records are old. That place closed. People make up stories." From behind the door, Lily's small voice broke through the tension. "That's him." Everything stopped. The words were quiet, frightened, and enough. Atlas gave a deep growl that vibrated through the boards. Hank bolted. Grant lunged after him, but the tunnel answered first. Hank's heavy boots struck a weakened plank near the bend, and the old structure groaned. Dust fell. A beam snapped somewhere overhead with a sound like a tree breaking in a storm. Grant stopped chasing immediately. "Back!" he shouted. Hank disappeared into the deeper passage, his flashlight jerking wildly before vanishing around the corner. Caleb moved toward the service door. "We get Lily now." "Brace is set," Grant said. "But if that support goes, this section closes." Caleb wedged the pry bar into the doorframe. Grant took the other side. "Lily, move back as far as you can," Caleb called. "Cover your face with your coat." One tap answered, weaker than before. They pulled. The door resisted, swollen with damp, and jammed by a shifted board behind it. Caleb's shoulders screamed as he put force into the bar. Grant pushed with both boots planted, beard dusted with falling powder. Atlas barked once, then grabbed the bottom edge of a loose board with his teeth and pulled backward, not randomly, but at the one place the wood had split. The board cracked free. The door opened 6 inches. Cold air rushed out, and with it came Lily's small cough. Caleb dropped to his stomach and pushed his arm through. His hand found fabric, then a wrist, thin and freezing. "I've got you," Lily whimpered but reached back. Grant widened the gap enough for Caleb to slide one shoulder through. Lily appeared inch by inch, pale face smudged with dirt, short, messy, light brown hair stuck to her forehead, large blue eyes glassy with fear and exhaustion. She wore a purple winter coat, a cream sweater beneath it, dark jeans, worn snow boots, and one remaining purple glove. Her missing glove had led them here. Caleb pulled her into the passage and wrapped the thermal blanket around her. Atlas immediately pressed his body against her side, sharing warmth. Lily's small hand found the fur at his neck. "Mara," she whispered. "She's waiting," Caleb said. "You'll see her soon." The mine groaned again, louder. The cracked support above the door shifted, dropping a curtain of dust. Grant lifted Lily into his arms. "Move." Caleb turned toward the stairs, but a section of ceiling behind them collapsed, not fully, but enough to send broken boards and rocks sliding across the path. The way back narrowed to a crawl space. Grant, carrying Lily, could squeeze through first. Atlas followed, then turned, waiting for Caleb. Caleb looked up and saw the brace he had set bending under pressure. If it gave before Grant cleared the tight section with Lily, the falling timber could block them all in. He shoved his shoulder beneath the support and pushed upward. Pain flashed bright through his body. "Go." Grant looked back. "Caleb, go." This time it was not a request. Grant carried Lily through the crawl space, Atlas hesitating between obedience and loyalty. Caleb looked at the dog. With her, the words cost him. Atlas's ears flattened, but he obeyed, crawling after Grant and Lily. For one terrible moment, Caleb was alone under the beam. The darkness breathed around him. The tunnel became the war again. He heard the old radio. He heard the boy. He felt the crushing certainty of being too late. His knees shook. The support pressed down, grinding into his shoulder. "Not again," he whispered. But this time, the words were not despair. They were defiance. From beyond the crawl space, Atlas barked sharply. Then again, not from ahead, from the side. Caleb turned his head and saw the dog's muzzle appear through a gap between broken boards near the left wall. Atlas had found another opening, a small service gap partly hidden by debris. Grant's voice came after him. "Caleb, left side, there's a gap." Caleb shifted carefully, letting the support settle onto the wedged brace instead of his shoulder. It held for one breath, then two. He dropped and crawled toward Atlas's bark. Rocks scraped his arms. His uniform tore at the sleeve. The gap was barely wide enough. Atlas dug at the snow-packed debris from the other side, paws moving with frantic precision. Caleb pushed forward as the beam behind him gave way with a violent crack. Dust swallowed the passage. A hand grabbed Caleb's wrist. Grant, another force, pulled at his sleeve. Atlas, teeth locked in fabric, but careful not to bite skin. Caleb slid through the gap and out into the lower stairwell just as the door chamber collapsed behind him with a roar that shook the mountain. They stumbled upward into the shed, then out into the white daylight, where the storm had thickened again but the air felt impossibly wide. Grant lowered Lily into the back seat of his county vehicle and wrapped more blankets around her. She was shaking, but awake. Caleb knelt in the snow, coughing dust, one hand braced on the ground, the other pressed to his injured shoulder. Atlas stood over him, body trembling, black mask streaked with gray powder, amber eyes fixed on Caleb's face until Caleb managed to look back. "Good boy," Caleb whispered, voice broken. "You stubborn, perfect dog." Lily, wrapped in blankets, reached one small hand toward Atlas. The Malinois stepped to her, lowering his head so she could touch him. "Is Mara really alive?" she asked. Caleb looked at the mountain, then at the child they had pulled from beneath it. His chest hurt, but the old hollow place inside him did not feel endless now. "Yes," he said. "And because of you, her babies are too." Grant shut the vehicle door to block the wind, then turned to Caleb. His official mask was gone. In its place was respect, fear, and something close to gratitude. "You held that beam long enough." Caleb shook his head, eyes on Atlas. He found the way out. Grant followed his gaze to the K9 and nodded. "Then he saved both of you." In the distance, the delayed rescue sirens finally echoed through the storm. Caleb sank back against the truck tire, exhausted, alive, and strangely still. The boy from his memory was not gone. Caleb knew he never would be, but for the first time in years, that memory did not end only in failure. It had been answered by a girl's hand touching a dog's paw in the dark, by a mother dog waiting beside a fire, and by a K9 who had refused to let the past decide who could still be saved. The chapter ends with Lily alive in Grant's vehicle, Atlas standing between Caleb and the storm, and the rescue team arriving as the collapsed mine seals the darkness behind them. By the time Caleb Mercer returned to the cabin, the storm had begun to lose its voice. Snow still fell across Raven Creek, but it no longer came sideways like a living enemy. It drifted down in tired sheets over the pines, over the old service road, over the mountain that had almost kept its secrets. Deputy Grant Holloway's county vehicle stopped first, its tires crunching into the packed snow near the porch. Caleb stepped out slowly from his truck, one hand pressed against his injured shoulder, his green digital camouflage uniform torn at the sleeve and streaked with gray dust from the mine. His angular face was pale beneath the cold, his blue-gray eyes hollow with exhaustion, but he was upright. Atlas jumped down beside him, the Belgian Malinois still alert despite the dirt in his deep fawn coat and the powder marking his black mask. The K9's ears were high, his amber eyes fixed on the cabin door, as if he knew the rescue was not finished until the living were brought back to the living. Grant opened the rear door of his vehicle and lifted Lily Ann Porter carefully into his arms. The 9-year-old girl looked smaller in daylight than she had in the dark, wrapped in 2 thermal blankets, her pale face smudged with dirt, short light brown hair tangled around her cheeks, and frightened blue eyes blinking against the snow. Her purple winter coat was torn at one cuff, and one hand still wore the single glove that matched the one now sealed in Grant's evidence bag. She was shaking, but awake. That was enough to make the whole world feel different. The cabin door opened before anyone knocked. June Whitaker stood in the doorway, small and fierce in her burgundy knitted hat and heavy brown coat, one hand pressed against her chest as though she had been holding her breath since they left. Behind her, Dr. Naomi Bell appeared with tired hazel eyes, auburn hair falling loose around her face, her dark teal veterinary jacket stained from hours of work. Naomi did not ask if they had found Lily. She saw the child in Grant's arms, and her face softened with a relief too deep for words. "Bring her in," she said, "by the fire." The cabin received them like a body receiving breath. Grant carried Lily to the couch, while Naomi checked her temperature, pupils, pulse, and breathing with professional gentleness. June wrapped another blanket around the girl's shoulders and set warm broth nearby without forcing it into her hands. Caleb stood just inside the door, unable to move farther. He looked toward the hearth. Mara lay on the braided rug, her black and tan fur cleaner now, her injured hind leg carefully bandaged, her body still thin but no longer collapsing inward. Copper and ash nursed weakly against her belly. Penny slept in a towel nest near Atlas's usual place, the little white patch on her chest rising and falling more clearly than it had the night before. Mara's amber brown eyes opened when Lily made a small sound. The mother dog lifted her head. At first, no one spoke. Lily turned toward the hearth, as if pulled by something stronger than pain. Her eyes widened. "Mara," she whispered. Naomi moved to stop her from standing too quickly, but Lily was already sliding off the couch. Grant reached as if to catch her, then stopped when he saw Mara trying to rise too. The dog's injured leg trembled. Caleb took one step forward, but Atlas moved first. The Malinois crossed the room and stood beside Mara, not blocking her, not pushing her down, simply steadying the space around her. Mara leaned against Atlas for half a breath, then took one limping step toward Lily. The girl dropped to her knees on the rug and wrapped both arms around the German shepherd's neck. Mara pressed her muzzle into Lily's shoulder and made the same broken sound she had made over the purple glove, only now it was not grief alone. It was recognition returned. Lily cried into Mara's fur. "You kept them safe," she whispered. "I knew you would. I told them you were brave." Caleb watched from the doorway, and the old memory inside him shifted. The boy in the village was still there. The failure was still there. But now there was also this, a child found alive, a dog mother reunited with someone who loved her, a second signal heard in time. June looked at Caleb, and there were tears in her hazel eyes, though her voice stayed steady. "Some prayers come back muddy," she said softly, "but they come back." Then Penny woke. The tiny female puppy, still the weakest of the three, lifted her head from the towel nest and gave one fragile squeak. Atlas turned immediately, but Lily looked up first. Mara, still pressed against the girl, stretched her muzzle toward the sound. Penny wobbled onto her delicate paws, stumbled twice, then crossed the rug in an uneven line straight toward Atlas. She did not go first to Mara, or to the warmth of the fire, or to the hands reaching to help her. She reached Atlas's front paws, leaned against the big Malinois' leg, and fell asleep standing. Everyone in the room went silent. Caleb felt something open in his chest, not like a wound this time, but like a locked door. In the middle of all that had been broken, the smallest life in the room had chosen the guardian who had refused to give up. Grant cleared his throat first, because someone had to return the world to facts. His gray eyes were damp, but his voice remained controlled. "Lily, I need to ask you questions later, but not now. For now, you're safe." Lily nodded without letting go of Mara. Naomi looked at Grant over the child's head. "She needs a clinic evaluation. Ambulance is on the way now that the road is open, Grant said. They'll take her to county medical. I'll ride behind. June's expression tightened. And her mother? Grant looked toward the window. We found Carla Porter at her house. She's on her way here with another deputy. Caleb turned slightly. He had not met Carla yet, but he had heard enough to expect fear, guilt, and maybe lies. When she arrived 20 minutes later, she came through the door like someone already punished by her own heart. Carla Porter was 34, thin and exhausted, with a narrow, tired face, light brown hair tied messily behind her head, anxious blue-green eyes swollen from crying, and a worn beige winter parka over a faded plaid shirt. Her old brown work boots left wet tracks across the floor, but she did not notice. She saw Lily on the couch, now wrapped in blankets beside Mara, and stopped as if her body had forgotten how to move. "Lily," she breathed. The girl looked up. For one terrible second, shame stood between them. Then Lily reached out, and Carla crossed the room with a sound that broke before it became words. She folded around her daughter carefully, trembling, apologizing over and over without being able to finish a sentence. Naomi turned away to give them privacy. June wiped her hands on her coat and pretended to check the soup. Caleb did not look away, not because he wanted to intrude, but because he needed to see that some reunions were still possible in this world. Carla later told Grant enough to open the door the county had failed to force for 2 years. She had cleaned kennels at Haven Ridge Working Dogs. She had seen Hank Rusk move old dogs, sick dogs, and females who had been bred too many times into trucks with no adoption paperwork. Mara had been one of them, a gentle German shepherd who let Lily sit outside her kennel and read picture books aloud. Carla had stayed quiet because Hank had threatened her job, then threatened to make trouble for Lily. Fear had made silence feel like protection, until silence nearly cost her the child she was trying to protect. The investigation did not end that day, but it finally began in a way that could not be buried. Grant filed the reports with photographs from the shed, the broken tag from Mara's collar, Naomi's medical notes, Lily's statement, Carla's confession, and the partial Haven Ridge transfer sheet marked K17F. Hank Rusk was caught before evening near an old county road, his dark truck stuck in a snowbank with a plastic-wrapped folder hidden under the seat. Caleb was not there for the arrest. He did not need to be. His work that day was at the cabin, beside the fire, where Mara slept with Lily's hand resting in her fur, and Atlas stood watch over Penny, as if the tiny puppy were a command from heaven. In the days that followed, Raven Creek changed in small, visible ways. People who had avoided Caleb's cabin began leaving things at the gate: clean towels, dog food, blankets, a space heater, old fencing, a bag of puppy milk replacer, a handwritten card from Lily's class. June organized the chaos with the authority of a woman who had waited decades for the town to remember it still had a heart. Naomi came every morning and evening to check Mara's leg, Penny's weight, Ash's breathing, and Copper's growing habit of trying to bite Caleb's bootlaces. Grant returned, not with suspicion, but with paperwork, county contacts, and a quiet apology he never fully said but showed in every action. Lily recovered quickly enough to visit with Carla under Naomi's watch. She still looked pale, and loud noises made her flinch. But when she sat beside Mara, her small shoulders relaxed. Mara healed more slowly. Her scars stayed, one near the shoulder, one around the neck, one in the way she counted her puppies whenever anyone opened a door. But she began to eat, then to stand, then to rest without waking at every footstep. Copper became bold first, a light brown little troublemaker with sandy paws and a heroic belief that Caleb's black combat boots were enemies to be conquered. Ash remained quieter, dark, and watchful, preferring the warm shadow beneath the table. Penny followed Atlas everywhere, stumbling after his long legs with ridiculous seriousness, sometimes sitting beside him and trying to copy his alert posture. Atlas tolerated it with solemn patience. Spring did not come all at once. It arrived in drips from the roof, in mud beneath the snow, in the first thin bird song beyond the pines. Caleb's cabin, once a place built to keep the world out, began to open. Naomi suggested the idea first, while changing Mara's bandage. You have the land. You have the shed. You have a dog who finds the forgotten before anyone else does. Caleb looked at her. "I'm not running a rescue." June, sitting at the table with a notebook already open, said, "Good. Then you won't ruin it by thinking you know everything." Grant helped with permits. Naomi handled medical protocols. June called the church, the feed store, and every stubborn widow in Raven Creek. Carla volunteered to clean kennels once the county cleared her, not because it erased her silence, but because it gave her hands something honest to do. Lily drew the sign. She wrote the name in careful letters. Atlas Ridge Haven. Caleb carved it into wood himself. Beneath it, June insisted on a second line. For the ones who served, waited, and were not forgotten. On the day they hung the sign, the last snow still clung to the shadows beneath the pines. Caleb stood at the gate in his green uniform, black boots planted in thawing earth, face calm but no longer empty. Atlas stood beside him, alert and steady, facing the same direction as the Navy SEAL. Mara lay in the sun with Copper, Ash, and Penny tumbling near her paws. Lily held Carla's hand. Naomi carried a clipboard. Grant hammered the final nail into the post. June brought soup, because June believed every beginning required feeding someone. Caleb looked at the cabin, the dogs, the people, the mountain beyond them, and understood at last that Atlas had not only led him into a mine, Atlas had led him back into life. Sometimes grace did not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it came as a dog paw under a locked door, a child's finger reaching back, a mother's broken whimper, and a fire kept burning until everyone found their way home. The chapter ends with Atlas Ridgehaven opening under the pale spring sun, while Caleb, Atlas, Mara, Lily, and the people of Raven Creek stand together before a future built from everything the storm failed to destroy. Sometimes, miracles do not arrive with thunder, bright skies, or voices from above. Sometimes, God sends them quietly through a loyal dog who refuses to ignore a cry in the dark, through a wounded mother who keeps protecting her children, through a frightened child who still believes someone will come, and through a broken man who discovers that his heart has not died after all. Caleb thought he was walking into that frozen mine to save Mara, Lily, and the puppies. But in truth, God was also leading him back to life. Atlas was not just following a scent, he was following a purpose. He was carrying Caleb toward the place where pain could become mercy, where guilt could become courage, and where a lonely cabin could become a haven for the forgotten. In everyday life, many people carry silent storms inside them. Some are grieving someone they lost. Some are hiding guilt they never speak about. Some feel forgotten, tired, or too broken to begin again. But this story reminds us that God can work through the smallest acts of kindness, opening a door, answering a cry, staying beside someone in pain, feeding a hungry animal, or choosing to care when walking away would be easier. No life is too wounded for grace. No heart is too frozen for love to return. And sometimes, the very soul you think you are saving may be the one God uses to save you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment below and tell us where you are watching from, or share a moment when an animal, a person, or an act of kindness helped you through a difficult season. And if you want more stories of faith, loyalty, courage, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel so these messages can reach more people who need them. May God bless you, protect your home, comfort your heart, guide your steps, and remind you that even after the darkest winter, His love can still lead you back to the light.